Chapter 18 of That Mainwaring Affair. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. That Mainwaring Affair by A. Maynard Barber. Chapter 18. An Unforeseen Foe. Though nearly 6 weeks had elapsed since the death of the master of Fair Oaks, and as yet no light had been shed on that mysterious event, the interest of the public mind in the affair had in no wise abated during this brief interim. On the contrary, its curiosity had been so whetted by the partial revelations of the inquest that it had eagerly followed each step of the legal proceedings leading toward the inevitable contest over the property, ready to hail with delight the appearance of the Mainwaring skeleton when it should step forth from its long hiding to disclose the secrets of the past. As early as possible, a petition, setting forth the terms and conditions of the last will and testament of Hugh Mainwaring, and praying for letters of administration in accordance therewith to be issued to William H. Whitney, the executor named in said will, had been filed in the district court. A few days thereafter, the petition of Eleanor Houghton Mainwaring for letters to be issued to Richard Hobson was also filed. The hearing in the application for letters of administration occupied several days. Very little evidence was adduced, however, which had not already been given at the inquest, and in due time an order was issued by the court appointing Mr. Whitney administrator of the estate, with instructions that the same be adjusted according to the terms of the lost will. From this order, Eleanor Houghton Mainwaring, through her attorney Hobson, had appealed, and the contest had at last begun. For greater convenience during the legal proceedings, Ralph Mainwaring had closed the suburban residence, dismissing what servants were no longer needed, though still retaining the new coachman, and had removed to Hugh Mainwaring's city residence, where he and his son made themselves perfectly at home, dining with Mr. Whitney at his club. Mrs. LaGrange, having been compelled to resign her position at Fair Oaks, had also removed to the city, and taken apartments in a convenient hotel until the termination of her suit. The afternoon of the second day since the opening of the case was drawing to a close, the testimony on the appellant's side had been taken, and it was expected that the respondent would be heard on the following day, when an event transpired which completely overthrew all proceedings thus far, and which promised the waiting public developments as startling as could be desired. This event was none other than the filing in the district court of a document purporting to be the last will and testament of the father of the deceased Hugh Mainwaring, by the terms of which the Mainwaring estate, as it then existed, together with the bulk of his other property, passed to Harold Scott Mainwaring, an elder son who had been previously disinherited, but was by this will restored to his full rights. With this document, worn and yellow with age, was filed a petition, setting forth the claims of one Harold Scott Mainwaring, the lawful, living, and only son of the said Harold Scott Mainwaring named in the will, but since deceased, and sole heir of the Mainwaring estate, and praying for letters of administration to be issued to George D. Sutherland, attorney for the said lawful heir. The court adjourned amid intense excitement, just as the newsboys were crying the headlines of the evening papers. A new heir to the Mainwaring property. Discovery of will secreted more than 25 years. Millions wrongfully withheld from the rightful owner. Strangely enough, the two most interested in this unexpected turn of affairs were among the latest to learn the surprising news. Ralph Mainwaring, having felt slightly indisposed, and knowing that his side would not come up for hearing until the following day, had made himself as comfortable as possible in the elegant apartments which he had appropriated to his own use, while his son had left the courtroom at an early hour to devote the remainder of the afternoon to letter writing. The latter glanced up from his writing and nodded pleasantly as Mr. Whitney, pale with excitement, was ushered by the butler into the library. "Mr. Mainwaring, is your father in?" the attorney inquired hastily. "I believe so," replied the young man, smiling broadly. "The last I knew, the governor was luxuriating in his rooms upstairs. I think you will find him there now. How's the case coming on, sir?" he added, as the attorney turned quickly towards the hall. "Anything new developed?" "Yes, decidedly new," Mr. Whitney answered rather brusquely. "You had better join us upstairs," and he disappeared. The young man's face grew suddenly serious, and springing from his chair, he swiftly followed the retreating figure of the attorney, arriving just in time to hear the latter exclaim, in reply to some question from his father, "Well, sir, the storm has burst." Ralph Mainwaring was, as his son had said, luxuriating in a superb reclining chair, his eyes half closed, enjoying a fine Havana, but the attorney's words seemed to produce the effect of an electric shock. "The deuce, sir! What do you mean?" he demanded, instantly assuming an upright position. "I simply mean that what I have expected and dreaded all along has at last come to pass." "Then, since it was not unexpected, it is to be presumed that you were at least prepared for it. That shyster and his designing client must, at the last moment, have exerted their inventive faculties to a remarkable degree." "On the contrary," said the attorney, quietly ignoring the other's sarcasm, and handing copies of the evening papers to father and son, "I am satisfied that neither Hobson nor his client has any part in the developments of this afternoon." A brief silence followed, during which the attorney watched the two men before him, noting the strange contrast between them, never until that moment so apparent. Young Mainwaring's boyish face grew pale as he read, and he occasionally glanced at Mr. Whitney, as though seeking in his face either confirmation or contradiction of the report, but he remained calm and self-possessed, preserving his gentlemanly bearing to the close of the interview. The face of the elder man, however, rapidly assumed an almost apoplectic hue, the veins standing out from his temples like whipcords, and when he spoke his voice trembled with rage. He was the first to break the silence, as, with an oath, he flung the papers upon the floor, exclaiming, "It's a lie from beginning to end, the most preposterous fabrication of falsehood that could be devised. The will, as it is called, is nothing but a rank forgery, and the man who dares assert any claim to the estate is a damned impostor, and I'll tell him so to his face." "I examined the document very carefully, Mr. Mainwaring," said the attorney, "and I shall have to admit that it certainly has every appearance of genuineness. If it is a forgery, it is an exceedingly clever one." "Do you mean to tell me that you believe for one moment in this balderdash?" demanded Ralph Mainwaring, at the same time rising and striding about the room in his wrath. "The utter absurdity of the thing, that such a will ever existed in the first place, and then that it would be secreted all these years only to be discovered just at this critical moment. It is the most transparent invention I ever heard of, and it is a disgrace to your American courts that the thing was not quashed at once." "That could not very well be done," said Mr. Whitney with a quiet smile, "and as the matter now stands, the only course left open to us is to prepare ourselves for a thorough investigation of the case." "Investigation be damned!" interrupted the other. But before he could proceed further, he was in turn interrupted by young Mainwaring. "I say, Governor, you'd best cool down a bit and listen to what Mr. Whitney has to say. If this thing is a forgery, we surely can prove it so, and if it isn't, why, all the bluster in the world won't help it, you know." His father faced him with a look of withering contempt. "If it is a forgery, I tell you there are no ifs about it. I suppose, though, you are just fool enough that, if any man made a pretense of a claim to the estate, you would simply hand it over to him, and thank him for taking it off your hands." "That's just where you are wrong, Governor. I would fight him fair and square, and he would have to prove a better claim than mine before he could win. But the point is this, don't you know? You can fight better with your head cool and your plans well laid beforehand." "The young man is right," said Mr. Whitney quickly. "There is every indication that our opponent, whoever or whatever he may be, is well prepared for contesting the case. I understand he has plenty of evidence on his side, and the best of legal counsel." "Evidence, I suppose," interposed Ralph Mainwaring with a sneer, "in support of a document that never existed, and a man that never lived on the face of the earth, for Harold Mainwaring never had a living son. Have you seen this remarkable individual?" "I believe no one in this country has seen him as yet, sir. He is expected to arrive on the Umbria, which I understand is due the early part of next week." The face of the other showed slight surprise at this statement, but before he could speak the young man inquired, "I say, Mr. Whitney, what sort of man is this attorney, Sutherland? Is he another Hobson?" Mr. Whitney shook his head significantly. "Mr. Sutherland is one of the ablest men in his profession. I consider him a fine jurist, an eloquent pleader, and a perfect gentleman. I had some conversation with him after court adjourned, and while he of course stated no details, he gave me to understand that his client had a strong case. He also informed me that Barton and Barton of London had been retained in the case, and that his client would be accompanied to this country by the junior member of the firm, Alfred Barton." "By Jove, that looks bad for us!" ejaculated young Mainwaring, while his father exclaimed impatiently, "Barton and Barton? Impossible! This is mere bombast. Why, man, the Bartons, father and sons, have been the family solicitors of the Mainwarings for the past 50 years. The old firm of Barton and Sons had charge of the settlement of the estate, when it passed into Hugh Mainwaring's